This episode is brought to you by Google Health. Stop chasing someone else's definition of health. What matters is what's healthy for you. Google Health offers a new kind of coach built with Gemini for effortless tracking, sleep insights, and holistic coaching tailored to you. Visit googlestore.com to learn more and start a new relationship with your health. Requires Google account, Google Health app, internet, and Google Health premium subscription. Features subject to change. Availability and results vary. Not intended for medical purposes. Works independently of Gemini apps. Check responses for accuracy.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about something I talk about a lot, the professional victim. But I realized I didn't have a post that had that title, and I didn't have a podcast episode that had that title. So if anybody was ever searching for it, they wouldn't be able to find it. It's discussed in countless other episodes, my idea of what this is and how it hurts you to have a parent like this or to be like this, but I did not have a specific episode about it, so here you go. And before we get to that, please do subscribe. I have over 226 subscriber episodes. Most recent was on agreeableness and how it is a personality trait that really helps relationships. And the one before that was about borderline personality disorder in marriage. If your marriage is very volatile and the conventional advice has never worked, this may be something that's going on. All right, so the professional victim is what I call it when somebody shapes their entire life identity around, you guessed it, being a victim. So I've used this story over and over that I made up about the bank, and it is just classic for how these people act, where everything, even a tiny little life experience that everybody else would just say is part of life, it turns into a David versus Goliath, good versus evil, scrappy underdog story. So the person went to the bank and they said, I went to the bank today. And would you believe that I asked for tens? And they told me they had no tens. And I said, yes, you do. I'll talk to your manager if you won't give me the tens. And I waited there. Because they're not going to get one past me like that. And so, this happens to me a lot. I don't know what it is. People just, they try to hurt me. They try to get things past me, but I wasn't having it. So I waited and I waited. I waited for the manager. And you know what happened? The manager gave me the 10, so it was what I thought all along. She just wasn't going to give them to me. But who walked out with the 10s? I did. And now I'm feeling like I have to lay down. It was a very difficult experience, very stressful. Stuff's always happening to me, as I tell you, right? So that's the professional victim. The professional victim can make a trip to the bank into this good versus evil story. And you, as the child of this person, feel at first when you are growing up like, oh my God, this is so terrible. Everything bad happens to my parent, my poor parent. You spend most of your time trying to assuage, the bad feelings of your parent because apparently the whole world is out to get them and they uniquely are the only one who can, survive in such an admirable way, because they're also the hero. So the victim is also the hero of these situations. Some professional victims, the story ends up, by the way, like I never got the tens. I started to hyperventilate. I had to sit down. I had to call a car because I just had to go home. And I didn't get the tens. And can you get me the tens from the bank? So that is a variant. There's a variant where there is never a heroic scrappy. There's no scrappy underdog. There's only a beaten underdog. And this person, the child feels even worse for. The first type of person that I see more often is the person who switches it around from being a victim to a hero. And so then they can be everything to the child. They have to get all the child's pity, but also all the child's admiration. And they try to do this with everybody around them. It's more of a covert narcissistic style where they're not a flagrant narcissist who would say, I went into the bank and of course they recognize me because I have the biggest bank account here. And they brought me over tea and coffee. Everybody wants to get a piece of me because I'm so successful. Then they gave me 20,000 tens and 20,000 hundreds and 2 gold bars. And, that's how it goes for me because I'm the shit, right? So it's not that. It's not a flagrant narcissist, an overt narcissist, we call it. It's this covert narcissist that's basically saying that they are special because they're the biggest victim or they're the biggest underdog that surprises everybody by how they can succeed in a situation that would leave a lesser person just felled, and unable to get the tens at all. And then there's this type that just wants the child to fix everything, and that is more of a borderline type. That is just pure victim. I had to lay down. I'm sick, calling you from the bank, wanting you to intervene, wanting you to pick them up, even though you're at work. That type of stuff is more borderline. Either way, the professional victim type goes along with some kind of personality disorder, because anybody that views themselves as a victim and sees life so black and white like that, without the nuance of, the person didn't have access to all the tens, okay, nobody's out to get you, nobody cares about you. The person, it's endemic to a personality disorder to have very little perspective, and to situate yourself in the center of all of these dramas. The cluster B personality disorders, which are the dramatic ones, histrionic, which I just did something on, borderline personality, which I just did something on, and narcissism, which I've done something on. But this is an idea, and histrionic can do this too, to some degree, but not super much, because they always want to be given so much attention. So if the only way they could get attention is to be a victim, then they'll try it, but they'll try anything. But this is more with narcissism and borderline personality. Now, somebody with depression may, in fact, feel like they are always being victimized, but they usually do not kind of involve other people, to the same degree. Like, they don't need an audience to sit there and listen to the story about the bank. They may well go to the bank and feel like that person didn't like me and that's why she didn't give me any tens and nobody likes me, but they're not going to call all of their kids on and make them listen to this story on speakerphone. That there's a personality disorder issue going on. So if you grew up with this kind of parent, you are probably very, very attuned to anybody suffering. You feel that your job is to eliminate anybody's suffering or struggles because that was your job as a child. You were the confidant. You were the one who was supposed to say, oh my God, they're so terrible. You figured it out though. Go you, and that was your role as a kid. So now, as an adult, you may be drawn to people that are similar, that you have to save, that rant at you about how bad the world is and how their boss is doing this and that to them, but they know the truth and they're gonna come out ahead and everybody's out to get them. And you're listening to these hour-long stories where this person is always being victimized, and then depending on which type of victim they are, either there's nothing to do about it and this is all the whole way that the world is and there's nothing, this is their only role in the world is to be victimized, or that they're gonna come out ahead. And this, of course, could be with the stupidest shit, right? Like, I went to get a late slip for one of my kids if I'm a teacher, and they told me they have no late slip. So I said, it's just that same kind of idea where even an infinitesimal interaction that would be forgotten by most turns into the high point of this person's day because their self-concept is a victim. And anything that can confirm that, confirmation bias, is great. So how does somebody get to be like this? Well, they had a parent that was like this, or they were truly victimized. And that's the sad truth, is that when you're victimized a lot, then you see yourself as a victim. So a lot of these people have sexual abuse history, physical, emotional abuse history. That's very common with borderline personality disorder that frequently has an overlap with this style. As I said, with narcissism too, the child has to develop a false persona of this awesome human being because they're going to rescue themselves from their shitty childhood. So they start to rely on themselves as this Superman character, the scrappy underdog, because that's very adaptive when they're in an abusive, traumatic, or neglectful situation. So the origin story of this style is truly somebody who feels that the world is bad because that's what they experienced. Or that was just how the stories went in their home, and they're learning that from a parent. Usually the parent was victimized. Somebody here was victimized, right? Because it does not make sense otherwise to have a lens of yourself as a victim unless there are experiences that go along with that, or you were taught to view even very normative quotidian experiences as evidence of victimization. So therapy can really, really help if you grew up with a parent like this, because you find yourself frequently rushing in to help the victimized. You probably have a job that's a caretaker job. You probably you put other people's needs above your own needs. And while most people really don't do that, these people do. If you grew up with a parent that was always making themselves and their problems the center stage, and you were the helper, you were the confidant, you were the soother, then it's very hard not to continue doing that in adulthood and to forget about your own needs and your own wants, because those never were really thought about. It was all your parent. And there's lots of books about stuff like this. The Glass Castle is a great book. Any book of like a really dysfunctional childhood, you can usually see this kind of thing going on, where the parents' sad stories are like center stage. There's stories about being victimized. There's stories about the world out to get them. And then the child has to come in and not be a child, but be a parentified child. And I have opposed parentified daughters of covertly narcissistic mothers. That is exactly this situation. I have one on eldest sons that talks about how eldest sons could turn into this situation. Sometimes it's the youngest kid who really gets the brunt of it when the others are out of the house. It's based on the personality of the kid. So if you start out as a sensitive kid, then a parent who needs an audience and needs basically a therapist is going to use you. And that's not malicious. It's just how they operate, and that's how they're seeking their validation in the world as a very emotionally immature person. And another book that could help is Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. So if this resonated with you, then that's a good book. Surviving a Borderline Parent is a good book. Children of the Self-Absorbed is a good book. There's a lot of good books. And I always have a lot of good books on my professional page recommended reading list, which is drsamantharodman.com /rec reading, recommended reading. So you can look that up too. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm going to be referring to this as kind of the explanation, the deeper explanation of this professional victim idea that I have used very often in my other discussions and talk about all the time with my clients, but I didn't have this kind of specific, the etiology of it and how it impacts the child. And of course, how it impacts the spouse, by the way, is that the spouse often turns into the perpetrator because they're victimized by everybody, right? So that's got to include the spouse. So then when there's any kind of marital conflict, they pull the same shit. Do you know what your father said to me? He told me he's going to be late from work. And I said, well, of course you are, because I do everything alone in this house. That kind of thing. Do you know what your mother said? She said she went shopping again. Again, we're barely going to be able to eat soon the way that she's spending us out of house and home. And I work like a dog to support her. This sort of style. And that's going to be bad for you too as a kid growing up hearing that. And you're going to have to ally with one over the other. And that's very difficult for the child, for you, as you know, if you've been in that situation. And again, therapy, insight-oriented therapy that goes back into family of origin can really, really help people make sense of how this parenting style impacted them and how to not recreate it with their own kids and how to not get into the kind of helper, role with every single person in the world who's possibly struggling. And how to focus maybe a little bit on yourself and your needs, because that was just not really allowed when you were a kid. All right, I hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk to y'all soon. Have a great day.